I'm wondering how, from your perspective, the disinformation landscape changed. Whether you mentioned information warfare, you mentioned disinformation, you mentioned like different kind of PR, black PR activities. What is in your perspective the biggest change?
I mean, in my experience, I mean, as I was saying, I was drawing it all the way back to the AIDS pandemic in the late 1990s, and so I mean, what's changed most dramatically there is just the speed that things develop at, and the ability to reach kind of large audiences, both in one place but also geographic. So the speed at which kind of you need to try and counter things has improved dramatically. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, that kind of AIDS stuff, we would use fairly traditional journalistic kind of investigative journalism and data journalism to try and counter it, simply by showing people the facts. But that means that we could dedicate like weeks to an investigation. You can no longer do that in a very fast-paced world where kind of not just social, but dark social, chat apps are able to kind of spread that content far faster. So I think the speed thing, but also just the world has become easier through automatic translation, through repackaging, through social media, and even search, and even Wikipedia. It's far easier now for far less money to reach a global audience. And so, where previously to get a critical mass, you needed to convince a lot of people in one place to have a lot of people making a noise. Now you can kind of only reach like 0.5% of people across like Africa, which is 1 billion people, and 1% of them is still a very large group of people screaming. And so to get that kind of mob together is far easier now than it was maybe even like 5 years ago. What we're already seeing with kind of AI is, again, a further speeding up of that, and a further erosion of kind of the watchdogs, is that it becomes ever and ever more difficult for the thin blue line, kind of what they use around police, but I don't know what you'd call the media, the thin kind of, kind of sense makers, because we're not truth keepers, but people who try and make sense to the world, is being stretched ever thinner. So I would say that those are, in my opinion, the two biggest changes. But also I think just this growing public perception that you can't trust information, I think is the other thing. Where 10, 15, 20 years ago, people believed that there was information authority and sources. Nowadays, you don't trust anything. And that's because it's been deliberately engineered. If you look at specifically Russian strategies around using the theory of reflective control from the Soviet era, they've repurposed that for a digital age. And it's deliberately to try and grow distrust in everything and everyone, because it creates apathy. Yeah. And if you're a dictator, you want apathy. You want people to just say, I can't change anything, so I might as well just have the best life possible. Kind of be a good person, just follow the rules and kind of focus on material kind of comfort rather than trying to change the world. And so that's very much become a global phenomenon now that I think that we weren't really confronting kind of even 5 years ago before the pandemic. Janet, I'm sure you've got some additional thoughts. So.
I think you've kind of said it all, but I would just add, at the same time, you've also had newsrooms really struggling. So in terms of what's changed, the newsroom structure has become depleted for real journalism. So you've had this double, so it coincides with the rise of disinformation and all these networks, which just are everywhere. And then yet the smaller group crop of journalists who are actually journalists who do the fact checking and do things, and their voices, so I think the risk is that those voices become less and less, and really people they can decide where they get their news anyway, or get their information. So I think that's that's also what's changed, and it continues to change, and that's why obviously it's important to keep protecting journalism, and it's costs money. It's big money. Journalism costs money. Ideas are free, or disinformation is actually easy to do.
Yeah.